The explosion rocked the yacht, sending champagne flutes crashing to the polished deck. Not an actual explosion, just the sound of Alexander Westwood slamming his fist onto the mahogany table, causing the crystal and silver to jump in protest. "Absolutely not," his voice carried across the Mediterranean waters. "I won't do it, Father. You can't force me to marry someone I've never even met." Richard Westwood, silver-haired patriarch of the Westwood financial empire, remained unfazed by his son's outburst, calmly sipping his 30-year-old scotch. The sunset painted golden streaks across his weathered face as he regarded his only son with calculated patience. "This isn't the Dark Ages, Alexander. You've met Penelope Blackwood several times at charity galas. Her father and I have been planning this merger." "Merger? Is that what we're calling it now?" Alexander paced the deck, his tailored Italian suit catching the sea breeze. At 34, he had built his own tech division within his father's empire, but somehow still found himself trapped in his father's web of expectations. "I'm not a commodity to be traded for better stock options." The Blackwood-Westwood alliance would create the most powerful financial institution in the Western Hemisphere, Richard continued, unmoved. "Sometimes personal sacrifices are necessary for legacy." Alexander stared out at the horizon, where the azure Mediterranean met the darkening sky. He had 1 month, 4 short weeks until the engagement gala that would seal his fate. Penelope Blackwood, Irish socialite, and according to tabloids, a woman who had gone through more assistance than Vogue had gone through fashion trends. "I'm already married," Alexander blurted, the lie escaping his lips before he could catch it. Richard's tumbler paused midway to his mouth. "Excuse me?" Alexander's mind raced ahead of his mouth, cobbling together the most outrageous escape plan of his privileged life. "Yes, I got married last month in Bali." His father's eyes narrowed to suspicious slits. "You expect me to believe you secretly married someone while on your meditation retreat? Where's this mysterious wife now?" "She's finishing some work in New York. I was going to introduce her next week, actually. Quite the coincidence with your announcement." Alexander adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a nervous habit from childhood. "Interesting." Richard sat down his drink with deliberate slowness. "I look forward to meeting this woman who has so thoroughly captivated my son that he's abandoned his lifelong aversion to commitment." The challenge was issued. Alexander recognized the chess move for what it was, a call of his bluff. "You will soon." Alexander turned away to hide the panic flashing across his features. What had he done? "You want me to— what?" Maya Rodriguez's voice echoed through the bustling Manhattan coffee shop, causing several patrons to glance her way. Folding her arms across her simple white blouse, she stared incredulously at the obscenely attractive man sitting across from her. With his dark hair perfectly styled and jawline that could cut glass, he looked like he had stepped straight out of a luxury watch advertisement. "I need you to pretend to be my wife for 1 month," Alexander repeated, sliding a contract across the table. "Your services come highly recommended." Maya pushed a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, trying to maintain her professional composure. Her small business, Hard Harmony, specialized in providing companions for corporate events and family functions. "Meet a date for your high school reunion to make your ex jealous. Someone to play girlfriend at the office Christmas party." Maya's agency had you covered, but a month-long charade catered for one of New York's most eligible bachelors. This was uncharted territory. "Mr. Westwood?" "Alexander," he corrected. "Mr. Westwood," she insisted, "what you're asking goes far beyond my standard services. I provide +1s for events, not wife impersonation for wealthy men trying to dodge arranged marriages." Alexander leaned forward, his cologne, something expensive and subtle, briefly distracting her. "The fee reflects the, shall we say, expanded scope." He tapped the figure on the last page of the contract. Maya's eyes widened at the number, enough to pay off her student loans and keep her struggling business afloat for 2 years? "This is ridiculous," she murmured, yet found herself flipping through the pages. "Think of it as an acting job," Alexander suggested, his arrogance softening slightly as desperation seeped in. "You'd have to move into my penthouse, of course, learn some basic information about me, appear at several social events, convince my father we're madly in love, and after the month we have a dramatic falling out. Quickie divorce, you walk away financially secure, and I avoid becoming a corporate bargaining chip." He shrugged as if discussing the weather rather than in elaborate deception. Maya studied him, this man who had everything and still wanted an escape. Part of her wanted to lecture him on privilege and responsibility. Another part recognized the trapped look in his eyes, something she understood all too well. "Why me?"
Surely you know dozens of women who jump at this chance. Because anyone from my social circle would have ulterior motives. You, however, he assessed her with those piercing blue eyes, have a reputation for professionalism and discretion. And you need the money. Maya bristled at his assumption, however accurate. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. A ghost of a smile played on his lips. My assistant thoroughly vetted your agency. Your clients praise your ability to be charming yet forgettable. Exactly what I need. Forgettable. Bet wee words stung more than it should have. Maya glanced at her watch. She had another client meeting in 30 minutes, a recently divorced man who needed a date to his sister's wedding. Her normal life? Safe? Predictable? This is insane, she said, standing up and gathering her things. Alexander remained seated, confidence radiating from his perfect posture. You have until tomorrow to decide. The contract includes an NDA and generous compensation for your discretion. Maya shouldered her bag, ready to walk away from this absurd proposition. But at the door she paused and looked back at him, the golden boy of Manhattan, sitting alone with his designer coffee and desperation. She'd definitely regret this tomorrow, she confirmed, and stepped out into the New York sunshine, wondering if she just made a deal with the devil in Armani. Maya Rodriguez had spent exactly 23 hours and 17 minutes debating her sanity. Her cramped one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn seemed especially small tonight as she paced between the kitchenette and the living area. The contract from Alexander Westwood spread across her coffee table like an open challenge. This is just a job, she told her goldfish, Ferdinand, who swam lazily in his bowl. A very unusual, possibly illegal, definitely unethical job. The photograph of her mother and younger sister smiled at her from the bookshelf, taken during happier times, before medical bills had consumed their modest savings. Sophia's final year of college tuition was coming due, and Maya had promised her mother she'd make sure her sister graduated debt-free. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Have you decided? Maya took a deep breath and typed back, I have conditions. The response came immediately. My office, 1 hour. The Westwood Tower dominated the Manhattan skyline, 80 stories of gleaming glass and architectural hubris. Maya felt distantly out of place as she rode the executive elevator to the penthouse offices, her sensible heels and department store dress a stark contrast to the polished luxury surrounding her. Alexander's assistant, a sleek woman with an expression that suggested she'd seen it all, led Maya through a series of minimalist white corridors into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Ms. Rodriguez, Alexander greeted without looking up from his 3 computer monitors. I assume your presence means you've accepted my proposal. I've considered it, Maya corrected, setting her bag down and seating herself without being invited. This small act of defiance made him finally look at her. Today he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. His hair was slightly tuzzed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, the only sign that the impending arranged marriage was actually stressing him out. Your conditions, he prompted, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. First, I need
half the payment up front, Maya began, proud that her voice didn't waver. Second, I'll need a detailed background on you, your family, and especially this Penelope person. Alexander nodded, making notes on a tablet. Reasonable. Third, I won't share a bedroom with you. His eyebrows shot up. We're adults, Miss Rodriguez. I wasn't planning to ravish you. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks, but pressed on. Fourth, I want a clause stipulate that if at any point I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, I can terminate the arrangement while keeping the full payment. You think I'm dangerous now? He looked genuinely puzzled. I think you're desperate, she replied candidly. Desperate people are unpredictable. Alexander studied her for a long moment, then unexpectedly smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from merely handsome to almost boyishly charming. Fair assessment. I agree to your terms. And finally, Maya hesitated, I need to be able to visit my family in Queens twice a week, alone. Something flickered across Alexander's face. Curiosity, perhaps. Family obligations are important. I respect that. He pulled out a revised contract from his desk drawer. I took the liberty of incorporating what I assumed would be your conditions. See if this meets your expectations. Maya accepted the document, scanning it carefully. Everything was there, plus additional clauses about privacy, security, and a confidentiality agreement that would make government intelligence agencies envious. You were confident I'd say yes, she observed. I was hopeful, he corrected, offering her a sleek fountain pen. People rarely surprise me, Miss Rodriguez, but something tells me you might be the exception. Maya signed her name, feeling as though she were simultaneously signing away a piece of her soul and opening a door to something entirely unpredictable. When do we start? She asked. Immediately. Alexander closed the contract in a leather portfolio. My driver will take you to your apartment to pack essentials. By this evening, you'll be officially moved into the penthouse. He checked his watch, a timepiece that probably cost more than her annual income. We have our first public appearance tomorrow night, the Thornfield Foundation Gala. Maya's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? That doesn't give me much time to prepare. Hence the urgency. He handed her a sleek black credit card for necessities. Wardrobe, styling, whatever you need to look the part of Mrs. Westwood. The weight of the card felt strange in her hand. I don't know the first thing about being a socialite's wife. You don't need to be a socialite's wife, Alexander said, returning to his computer. You need to be my wife. There's a difference. And what kind of wife would Alexander Westwood have? She challenged. He paused, looking up at her with an unexpected intensity. Someone remarkable enough to make me abandon my infamous bachelor ways. Intelligent, independent, not easily impressed by wealth. His eyes lingered on her a beat too long. Think you can manage that? For the first time since this bizarre scenario began, Maya felt a tiny flicker of something dangerous. Not fear, but interest, a curiosity about the man behind the arrogant facade. I'm a professional, Mr. Westwood. I can be whoever you need me to be. Alexander, he corrected again, more gently this time. If we're going to convince the world we're madly in love, you should probably start using my first name. Alexander, she repeated the name, feeling strangely intimate on her tongue. He nodded approvingly. Much better, Maya. The sound of her name in his rich baritone sent an unexpected shiver down her spine, a reaction she immediately filed away as professional hazard. Your driver should be waiting downstairs, Alexander said, effectively dismissing her as he returned to his work. I'll see you at home this evening. Home. The word hung in the air between them, laden with implications. Maya gathered her things and headed for the door, pausing on the threshold. Just so we're clear, this is a business arrangement, nothing more. Alexander looked up, his expression unreadable. Of course, just business. But as the elevator descended 80 floors to the bustling street below, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she had just signed up for much more than she had bargained for.
Westwood's penthouse was exactly what Maya had expected, a monument to masculine minimalism and obscene wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan that made her breath catch, despite her determination to remain unimpressed. The space was all clean lines, neutral tones, and carefully curated art pieces that probably cost more than her entire education. Your quarters, Alexander announced, leading her down a hallway to a guest suite larger than her entire apartment. I had my assistant stock the closet with some basics until your personal shopping appointment tomorrow morning. Maya stepped into the room, trying to mask her awe at the king-sized bed, private bathroom with a soaking tub and small sitting area complete with a writing desk. "This will do," she said with deliberate casualness. Alexander's lips twitched. "I'm glad my humble accommodations meet your standards." "Where's your room?" she asked, setting down her suitcase across the hall. He pointed to double doors at the opposite end. "Far enough for propriety, close enough to be convincing if anyone visits unexpectedly." Maya nodded, relieved yet strangely disappointed by the distance. "We should establish our story, how we met, when we fell in love, why the secrecy." "Already prepared." Alexander produced a leather-bound folder. "Our relationship timeline, important dates, and key details about how we fell madly in love during my spiritual journey in Bali." Spiritual journey? Maya couldn't contain her skepticism. "It sounds better than escaping board meetings," he replied with unexpected candor. "The irony that I used that trip to avoid responsibility, only to return with the ultimate commitment, isn't lost on me." Maya opened the folder, scanning the meticulously crafted fiction. "We met when I spilled green juice on your meditation mat." That's hardly romantic. It's specific and therefore believable. Besides, it says, "I found your clumsiness endearing." Alexander leaned against the doorframe, watching her reaction. "Feel free to embellish. The best lies contain elements of truth." "And what elements of truth should I include about you?" Maya challenged, closing the folder. "So far, all I know is that you're wealthy, arrogant, and allergic to arranged marriages." For a moment, Alexander looked genuinely caught off guard. Then he straightened, smoothing his already impeccable tie. "You'll have access to my schedule, my preferences, and enough personal information to be convincing. The rest," his eyes met hers with surprising intensity, "isn't relevant to our arrangement." "Everything is relevant if I'm going to convince your family I've fallen in love with you," Maya countered. Alexander checked his watch, an obvious deflection. "We can discuss character development over dinner. I have a conference call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. Make yourself comfortable." Before Maya could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone in the enormous apartment. She kicked off her shoes and padded into the living room, feeling like a trespasser in a museum after hours. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble, yet looked entirely unused. She opened the massive refrigerator, finding it stocked with expensive ready-made meals, champagne, and not much else. A man who didn't cook, or perhaps didn't eat at home. Another detail for her mental file. A series of framed photographs on a side table caught her attention, the only personal touch in the otherwise sterile space. Alexander, as a child, sitting on a horse, flanked by his stern-faced father. A graduation photo from what appeared to be Harvard Business School. Alexander shaking hands with various dignitaries and celebrities. He was smiling in all of them, yet none of the smiles quite reached his eyes. "Finding anything useful?" Maya startled, nearly dropping the frame in her hands. Alexander stood, watching her, his conference call apparently concluded. "Just doing my homework," she replied, setting the photo down carefully. "Learning about my beloved husband?" Something unidentifiable flickered across his face. "And what have you deduced, Mrs. Westwood?" The name sent an odd thrill through her which she quickly suppressed. "That you've spent your life meeting other people's expectations." His expression hardened. "Pop psychology isn't a part of our arrangement. Understanding you is," she replied evenly. "If I'm going to convince your father that I'm deeply in love with you, I need to know what version of you inspires that kind of devotion." For a breathless moment, they stared at each other, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Alexander's shoulders relaxed incrementally. "Dinner will be delivered at 8. Wear something formal. We need to practice being seen together." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Maya? The version of me that would inspire devotion doesn't exist. Remember that." Dinner was a surreal affair. Maya had chosen a simple black dress from the basics Alexander's assistant had provided, a garment that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. The private chef who arrived to prepare their meal barely batted an eye at her presence, leading Maya to wonder how many women had dined at this table before her. "Your father," Maya said delicately, cutting into her perfectly seared scallop. "Tell me about him." Alexander swirled his wine contemplatively. "Richard Westwood built an empire from a single investment firm. He values 3 things: power, legacy, and control, in that order." "And your mother?" "Died when I was 12. Cancer." His tone was neutral, but Maya caught the slight tightening of his hand around the wineglass. "She was the warmth in our family. After she was gone, the Westwood household became efficient." "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. Alexander nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting more. "What about your family, the ones in Queens you need to visit twice weekly?" Maya hesitated, unused to sharing her personal life with clients. But this wasn't a normal client relationship. "My mother and sister. Mom has MS, diagnosed 5 years ago. I help with her care, and I'm putting my sister through college." Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes, hence the need for my generous compensation. "We all have our motivations." "Mr. Westwood—" "Alexander," he corrected automatically. "Alexander," she amended, the name still feeling strangely intimate. "So, tell me about the woman I'm saving you from." He grimaced. "Penelope Blackwood, heiress to Blackwood Financial. Daddy's princess with a Columbia MBA and a reputation for getting exactly what she wants through any means necessary." "She sounds formidable." "She's a shark in Louboutins," Alexander said bluntly. "Brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless. In another life, I might have admired her, but not in this one." His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. "In this one, I value choice. My father and Gregory Blackwood have been planning this merger through matrimony since Penelope and I were in preschool. I refuse to be the final transaction in their corporate chess game." Maya studied him, seeing beyond the practiced charm to something unexpectedly genuine. "You're romantic," she realized aloud. Alexander nearly choked on his wine. "I'm a realist." No, Maya shook her head, a smile playing at her lips. "Deep down, beneath all that cynicism and designer armor, you actually believe in love. That's why you're going to these elaborate lengths to avoid a marriage of convenience." For once, Alexander seemed at a loss for words. The silence stretched between them, until the chef discreetly entered with the next course. "Tomorrow night," Alexander finally said, changing the subject, "you'll meet my father at the Thornfield Gala. He'll try to catch us off guard, looking for cracks in our story." "I'll be prepared," Maya assured him, allowing the deflection. "Before that, your schedule includes a session with my stylist, a briefing with my PR team, and lunch with my closest friend, James Porter." "Testing me already?" "James has known me since boarding school. If anyone can spot a fake relationship, it's him." Alexander's expression softened slightly. "He's also the only person who knows the truth about our arrangement. Consider lunch a dress rehearsal." Their eyes met across the table, the gravity of their deception settling between them like an invisible third guest. "1 month," Maya said quietly. 4 weeks of pretending to be madly in love, and then we go our separate ways." Alexander raised his glass in a mock toast to temporary matrimony. Maya clinked her glass against his, unable to ignore the strange flutter in her chest, to convincing lies and clean breaks. But as the evening progressed and Maya engaged in an unexpectedly entertaining debate with Alexander over dessert, she couldn't help but wonder if the lines between pretending and reality were not as clear-cut as she had initially imagined. They rehearsed their fabricated love story. Maya found herself wondering which would prove more difficult, fooling Alexander's family or remembering that her own growing fascination with the complex man behind the millionaire facade was just another part of the act. "Stop fidgeting," Alexander murmured, his breath warm against Maya's ear as they stood at the entrance of the Thornfield Foundation Gala. "You look stunning." It wasn't an empty compliment. After a day of whirlwind preparations, Alexander's stylist had dressed her in a midnight blue gown that draped elegantly across her curves, while a team of professionals had transformed her practical ponytail into soft waves that framed her face. Maya barely recognized herself in the mirrors that lined the entrance hall. "Everyone is staring," she whispered back, hyper-aware of his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. "Of course they are. The notorious Alexander Westwood has suddenly acquired a wife." His fingers traced small, reassuring circles against the fabric of her dress. "Just remember our story and follow my lead." Before she could respond, a flash of cameras temporarily blinded them. Alexander smoothly pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her waist with practiced ease. He smiled for the photographers, a perfect camera-ready smile that still didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Westwood," called a reporter, "who's your mystery lady?" Alexander turned to Maya, his expression softening into something that, had she not known better, she might have mistaken for genuine adoration. "This is my wife, Maya Westwood." The way he said it, with a hint of pride and protectiveness, sent an unexpected warmth spreading through her chest. "When did you get married? Where did you meet? Is it true you eloped in Bali?" The questions came rapid fire, and Maya found her frozen under the scrutiny. Alexander squeezed her waist gently, a silent reminder of her role. "We're keeping the details private," he told the reporters smoothly, "but yes, Bali was transformative." He gazed down at Maya with such convincing tenderness that for a moment, even she almost believed their farade. Sometimes, when you know, Maya forced herself to relax into his embrace, tilting her head up to meet his eyes. And sometimes, the last thing you're looking for is exactly what you need, she added, the rehearsed line flowing naturally from her lips. Alexander's eyes flickered with surprise at her convincing delivery, and he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead, an unscripted gesture that sent her pulse racing. "If you'll excuse us," he said to the reporters, "I'd like to introduce my wife to some friends." As they moved deeper into the ballroom, Maya exhaled slowly. "How was that?" "Perfect," Alexander murmured, still holding her close, "but the real test is approaching at 2. Maya followed his gaze to see a distinguished older man with silver hair making his way deliberately toward them. Richard Westwood's resemblance to his son was striking. Same commanding presence, same piercing blue eyes, but with none of the occasional warmth that flickered in Alexander's gaze. "Alexander," Richard greeted, his smile not reaching his eyes. "What a surprise, father," Alexander replied evenly. "I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Maya." Richard's calculating gaze swept over her, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. "Charmed, I'm sure. Funny, my son never mentioned he was even dating anyone seriously, much less contemplating marriage." Maya extended her hand, summoning every ounce of confidence she possessed. "Your son can be quite private, one of the many qualities I admire about him." Richard's handshake was firm, testing. "Indeed. And what is it you do, Mrs. Westwood?" "Maya is an event coordinator," Alexander interjected smoothly. "She specializes in creating authentic experiences for corporate clients." The irony of the statement wasn't lost on Maya, who smiled demurely. "I help people present their best face to the world." "How convenient," Richard remarked, the suggestion clear in his tone. "And your family?" "I don't believe I am recognized the name." "My father was a professor of literature at Queen College," Maya replied, sticking to their prepared backstory. "My mother was a pediatric nurse before her illness." "Modest beginnings," Richard noted with thinly veiled disapproval. Alexander's arm tightened protectively around her waist. "Maya's brilliance and compassion speak for themselves, father. Not everyone measures worth by financial portfolios." An awkward silence descended, charged with years of unspoken tension between father and son. "Well," Richard finally said, "I look forward to getting to know my unexpected daughter-in-law better. Perhaps you'll both join me for dinner this weekend at the estate." It wasn't a request, but a command. "We'd be delighted," Alexander replied, his tone suggesting anything but delight. As Richard moved away to greet other guests,
Maya released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I think he suspects something." "He always suspects something," Alexander replied, "but you handled him beautifully." His eyes lingered on her face with something like genuine admiration. "Ready for round two?" The Blackwoods just arrived. Maya followed his gaze to the entrance, where a striking couple was making their grand entrance. Gregory Blackwood, a bear of the man with a booming laugh, escorted his daughter, Penelope, a willowy blonde whose calculated smile didn't quite mask the predatory gleam in her eyes. "Showtime," Alexander murmured, guiding Maya toward the dance floor. "Dancing will give us an excuse to be unavailable for a few minutes while they make their rounds." Without waiting for her response, he pulled her into his arms, one hand settling on her waist while the other clasped hers. Maya had expected him to maintain a respectable distance, but he drew her close, their bodies nearly flush against each other as they began to move in time with the orchestra. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Westwood," she said, noting his effortless grace. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a dancer." 15 years of mandatory ballroom lessons," he replied with a hint of amusement. "My mother insisted." "She had good taste," Maya observed, as he guided her through a perfect turn. "She would have liked you," Alexander said quietly, an unexpected vulnerability in his tone. Before Maya could respond to this glimpse beneath his polished exterior, a smooth voice interrupted them. "Alexander Westwood, the rumors are true." They turned to find Penelope Blackwood, standing beside them, resplendent in a skin-tight red gown that left little to the imagination. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Flawless features arranged in an expression of polite interest that didn't match the calculation in her eyes. "Hello, Penelope," Alexander greeted coolly. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Maya." Penelope's perfectly manicured hand extended toward Maya. "Wife? How unexpected and recent, I gather." "Very," Maya confirmed, matching Penelope's grip with equal firmness. "When it's right, why wait?" "Why indeed?" Penelope's smile was razor-sharp, although some might consider it reckless to make such permanent decisions so hastily. "The most rewarding risks often appear reckless to outsiders," Alexander replied smoothly, pulling Maya closer to his side. His thumb traced small circles on her bare shoulder, a gesture so intimate that Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks. Penelope's gaze flicked between them, searching for weaknesses in their united front. "Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get better acquainted. Your father and mine are still quite keen on our families joining forces." "I'm afraid any merger will have to remain strictly business," Alexander said firmly. "We see," Penelope replied with unnerving confidence. "Marriage, like business, is about strategic timing." Her eyes rested on Maya with cool assessment, and some positions are more enduring than others. With that parting shot, she glided away to join her father, leaving an unsettled silence in her wake. "That was," Maya began. "Penelope being Penelope," Alexander finished, his jaw tight. "I apologize for her insinuations." "No need," May assured him, maintaining her composure. "This is exactly what I signed up for." Alexander studied her face with unexpected intensity. "You're remarkably good at this." "At pretending to be in love with you," Maya challenged, trying to lighten the suddenly charged atmosphere between them.
Greet him with a wry smile. "I face scarier clients than Penelope Blackwood." His laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound, caught her by surprise. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Maya Rodriguez." But the remainder of the evening they moved through the gala as a unit, her hand tucked into his eyes rarely leaving her face. They laughed at appropriate moments, shared private whispers for show, and presented such a convincing picture of newlywed bliss that even Maya began to forget, in fleeting moments, that it was all an elaborate performance. It was nearly midnight when they finally returned to the penthouse, both exhausted from the constant vigilance of maintaining their facade. "You were magnificent," Alexander told her as they entered the apartment, loosening his bow tie with a tired sigh. Even James was impressed, and he knew it was an act. Maya slipped off her painful heels with a grateful moan. Your father invited us to dinner this weekend, I noticed. Alexander poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler. We should prepare for a more intensive interrogation. And Penelope clearly isn't giving up without a fight, Maya observed, accepting the glass he offered her. The liquor burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from the inside. Penelope sees me as a challenge, not a person, Alexander said, his voice tinged with bitterness. To her, I'm simply another acquisition that makes strategic sense. Maya studied him over the rim of her glass. Is that how all women see you? As a prize to be won? Alexander's eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable in the dim light of the penthouse. Most don't look past the bank account and the last name. Their loss, Maya said, without thinking. A charged silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions and unexpected revelations. We should get some rest, Alexander finally said, setting down his empty glass. The society pages will be all over our sudden marriage by morning. Tomorrow will bring a new round of challenges. Maya nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the evening of pretending to be in love had blurred certain boundaries between them. Good night, Alexander, she said, softly, turning toward her room. Maya, he called after her, causing her to pause at the hallway. When she turned back, his expression was unreadable. Thank you for tonight. It was perhaps the most genuine thing he had said to her since their arrangement began, a simple acknowledgement that transcended their contractual relationship. You're welcome, she replied, and slipped away to her room before she could dwell on the strange ache in her chest or the growing fear that pretending to love Alexander Westwood might prove dangerously easy. You never mentioned your husband was Alexander Westwood, Maya's mother exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the society page Maya had reluctantly brought to their weekly family dinner. The modest living room in Queens felt worlds away from the penthouse Maya had called home for the past week. Here, family photos lined the walls, mismatched furniture told stories of years of use, and the smell of her mother's homemade arroz con pollo filled the air with warmth no designer apartment could replicate. It's complicated, Mama, Maya said, shooting a warning glance at her younger sister, Sophia, who was scrolling through her phone with increasing glee. Oh my God, you're all over social media, Sophia announced, turning her screen to show Maya. Mystery Mrs. Westwood is trending. People are obsessed with you two. Maya's stomach twisted with guilt as she saw the candid photo from the Thornfield Gala, Alexander looking at her with what appeared to be genuine adoration, his hand protectively at her waist. The photographers had captured a moment that seemed breathtakingly real. Mia, how could you keep the secret? Her mother pressed, confusion evident in her gentle face. All this time we thought you were working late, and you were actually falling in love with one of New York's most eligible bachelors? It happened very quickly, Maya said, sticking to their rehearsed story. We wanted privacy. But marriage, Sophia questioned skeptically. You've always said you'd never rush into anything serious. Maya fiddled with her wedding band, a tasteful platinum band with a dull finish. The diamond piece that Alexander had presented to her the morning after the gala. Like I said, it's complicated. Maya Rodriguez Westwood, her mother tested the name, a proud smile spreading across her face. My daughter married to a millionaire. Billionaire, actually, Sophia corrected, still scrolling through her phone. Alexander Westwood's net worth is estimated at, that's not why I married him, Maya interrupted sharply, the lie burning her throat. Her mother reached across the table, patting Maya's hand. Of course not, Mija, but surely this means you won't have to work so hard anymore. Maybe now you can focus on starting a family. Maya nearly choked on her water. Mama, we just got married. And with Alexander's resources, surely your sister's tuition won't be a burden anymore, her mother continued hopefully, and we could look into better treatment options for my condition. The weight of her family's expectations pressed down on Maya's shoulders. This was exactly why she'd taken the job,
to provide for them, to ease their burdens, but she hadn't anticipated the complications of bringing her fabricated marriage into their lives, of giving them hope based on a lie with an expiration date. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Maya said carefully. "Alexander and I are still adjusting to married life." "Will we get to meet him soon?" Sophia asked. "He's very busy," Maya hedged. "But maybe someday." The conversation mercifully shifted to Sophia's studies, but Maya remained distracted, her thoughts drifting back to the penthouse, where Alexander was hosting a business dinner. She'd been relieved when their schedules aligned to allow her this evening with her family, without him, but now she found herself wondering what he was doing, what he was saying, whether his colleagues were asking about his new wife. It was strange how quickly she'd become accustomed to his presence, to their shared breakfasts where he read financial news on his tablet while she planned their social calendar, to the way he absent-mindedly brought her coffee prepared exactly as she liked it when he knew she was tired. "Earth to Maya," Sophia waved a hand in front of her face. "Daydreaming about your handsome husband?" Maya blinked, realizing she'd completely missed her sister's question. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you're coming to my graduation next month," Sophia repeated, studying her with uncomfortably perceptive eyes. "Or will you be too busy with your fabulous new life?" "Of course I'll be there," Maya assured her, though she realized with a jolt that the graduation would fall after her arrangement with Alexander was scheduled to end. By then, the divorce story would be circulating, her sister's dream of financial security shattered. The thought made her stomach clench. Later, as she helped her mother wash dishes, the older woman spoke softly so Sophia couldn't hear from the living room. "Mija, are you truly happy? You seem anxious." Maya forced a smile. "Just adjusting to everything. It's been a whirlwind." Her mother's knowing eyes saw too much. "Love should bring peace, not worry. This man, he treats you well?" "Better than I expected," Maya admitted, surprised by the honesty in her own words. Despite his initial arrogance, Alexander had been unfailingly respectful, considerate, even genuinely kind at times. "Then that is what matters," her mother said firmly. "Money, fame, these things are nothing without respect and care." Maya nodded, the truth of those words settling heavily in her chest. "I know, Mama." "Bring him to dinner next week," her mother suggested, drying her hands on a worn dishcloth. "I want to meet the man who stole my practical daughter's heart so quickly." Maya froze, panic rising in her throat. "I don't think—" "I insist," her mother said with the gentle firmness that brooked no argument. "Family is family." Alexander was on a call when Maya returned to the penthouse, his voice carrying from his home office as she slipped off her shoes. She paused in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt. "The merger projections look solid," he was saying, his tone all business, "but I'm not willing to concede on the tech division. It stays under my direct control or no deal." Maya turned to head to her room when his next words stopped her. "My personal life is not a bargaining chip, James. My father needs to accept that I've made my choice."
Blackwood Alliance isn't happening, not on his terms anyway. A pause, then a tired laugh that contained no humor. "Yes, the newlywed is working out fine. She's not what I expected." Another pause. "More capable, more genuine. The arrangement is satisfactory." Maya felt an unexpected sting at being described so clinically. "Of course, I'm keeping my distance. This is business, not a romantic comedy." Alexander's voice hardened. 4 more weeks, and we execute the exit strategy. Clean, simple, profitable for all parties." Maya backed away silently, not wanting to hear more. She'd known exactly what this was from the beginning, a business transaction with mutual benefits. Yet somehow hearing Alexander reaffirm it so coldly made her chest ache in a way she hadn't anticipated. She was halfway to her room when Alexander emerged from his office, startling when he saw her in the hallway. "Maya," he said, his business mask slipping into the more relaxed expression he wore when they were alone. "I didn't hear you come in. How was your family dinner?" "Enlightening," she replied, unable to keep a hint of coolness from her voice. "My mother saw the society pages." Alexander winced slightly. "I should have warned you the photos would circulate quickly." Was she upset? Quite the opposite. She's thrilled her daughter has married into wealth and status. Maya crossed her arms defensively. "She wants you to come to dinner next week." Alexander went still. "That wasn't part of our arrangement." "Well, apparently my family is getting invested in our fictional marriage." Maya couldn't contain the bitterness in her voice. "My mother is already talking about better medical treatments and my sister's future security. They think all their problems are solved because I've married a Westwood." Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. "You didn't tell them the truth." "How could I?" Maya challenged. "Hi, Mom, great news! I'm not actually in love. I'm just pretending to be a billionaire's wife for money." That should make for a heartwarming family dinner conversation. Alexander approached her cautiously, as if sensing the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. "Maya, I'm sorry. I didn't consider how this would affect your family." "No, you didn't," she agreed, suddenly exhausted. "Because to you, this is just business, a clean, simple transaction with an exit strategy." Alexander's expression shifted, realization dawning. "You heard my call with James." "Enough of it." Maya moved past him toward her room, no longer wanting to continue the conversation. "Don't worry, I'm not confused about our arrangement. I know exactly what this is." Alexander caught her arm gently, turning her to face him. "Maya, I'm tired," she interrupted, pulling away from his touch. "It's been a long day of lying to everyone I care about." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or understanding. "For what it's worth, not everything is an act." Maya studied his face, searching for the truth behind his carefully controlled expression. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, his phone rang, his father's ringtone. Alexander glanced at it with visible frustration. "Take it," Maya said, stepping back. "Business calls." She closed her bedroom door behind her, leaning against it as she listened to Alexander's voice shift back into his corporate persona, smooth and controlled. Maya slid to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She had 4 more weeks of pretending to be in love with Alexander Westwood, 4 weeks of lying to her family, 4 weeks of navigating the treacherous waters of high society while keeping her heart safely walled off from the man who had hired her to be his wife. The problem was her heart wasn't cooperating with the plan, because despite her best intentions, despite knowing exactly what their arrangement was, Maya was starting to care for the complex, contradictory man behind the here billionaire facade. And that was the most dangerous complication of all. On the other side of the door, Alexander ended his call with his father, staring at Maya's closed door with an expression of conflicted longing that no one was there to witness. Alexander Westwood had faced hostile takeovers, cutthroat board meetings, and once a particularly aggressive bear during a corporate retreat in Montana.
None of those experiences had prepared him for the anxiety of standing outside Maya's family home in Queens, holding a bouquet of flowers and an expensive bottle of wine. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Maya observed, adjusting his tie slightly. The casual touch felt strange, intimate, after the tension of the past few days. "I've never done the meet the family thing before," Alexander admitted, surprising them both with his candor. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Never? In all your relationships?" "I don't do relationships," he replied with a self-deprecating smile. "I do arrangements, business dinners, strategic social appearances." He glanced at the modest 2-story house. "Family dinners with mothers and sisters aren't part of my usual repertoire." Something in his confession softened Maya's lingering resentment. "Well, tonight you're not Alexander Westwood, billionaire CEO.
You're just Alexander, my husband who loves me desperately and wants to make a good impression on my family." "Just that easy," he quipped, but she caught the flash of nervousness in his eyes. Maya hesitated, then placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Just be yourself. Well, your better self, the one who brings me coffee in the mornings and actually laughs at my terrible jokes." "I like your jokes," Alexander protested, his tension visibly easing at her touch. "Then we'll be fine." Maya reached for the doorbell, but before she could press it, she looked up at him seriously. "My family means everything to me, Alexander. Please don't." "I won't hurt them," he promised, understanding her unspoken concern. His free hand covered hers, warm and steady. "I'll play my part perfectly." The door swung open before Maya could respond, revealing Sophia, in jeans and an NYU sweatshirt, her eyes widening almost comically as she took in Alexander's imposing figure. "Holy sh—" She caught herself, grinning. "You actually brought him." "Sophia, this is Alexander," Maya introduced, feeling strangely self-conscious. "Alexander, my sister Sophia." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Alexander said, his voice warming with a charm that seemed surprisingly genuine. "Maya speaks of you constantly." Sophia's skeptical expression melted slightly. "All good things, I hope?" "She's very proud of your academic accomplishments," Alexander replied, earning an approving glance from Maya as they stepped inside. The modest home, with its worn furniture and family photos everywhere, was a stark contrast to Alexander's minimalist penthouse, but he moved through it with unexpected ease, his usual intimidating presence softening somehow to fit the space. "Mama, we're here," Maya called, leading Alexander toward the kitchen where a delicious aromas wafted through the house. Atlanta Rodriguez emerged, wiping her hands on an apron, her face lighting up at the sight of her daughter. Her warm smile faltered only slightly when her gaze landed on Alexander, taking in his tailored suit, his obvious wealth, the nervous set of his shoulders. "Senor Westwood," she greeted, her accent more pronounced than usual, a sign Maya recognized as maternal anxiety. "Welcome to our home." Mrs. Rodriguez, Alexander stepped forward with unexpected grace, presenting the flowers. "Please, call me Alexander. Thank you for inviting me to dinner." "You married my daughter without meeting her family first," Elena observed, accepting the bouquet with a questioning look. "That seems unusual, no?" "Mama," Maya warned, but Alexander placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, a silent signal that he could handle this. "It was unusual," he acknowledged, with disarming honesty. "But when I met Maya, everything about my life changed. Sometimes the heart doesn't follow conventional timelines." Maya stared at him, amazed at how sincere he sounded, how the practiced lines from their backstory now flowed with genuine emotion. "And what exactly are your intentions with my daughter?" Elena pressed, unmoved by his charm. "To make her happy," Alexander replied simply. "For as long as she'll let me." A strange silence fell, the double meaning of his words hanging in the air between them. For a moment, Maya could almost believe he meant it. Elena studied him intently before her expression softened. "Come, dinner is ready. We will talk more while we eat." The meal progressed with surprising ease. Alexander proved adept at deflecting personal questions with charming anecdotes about their fictional courtship in Bali, while asking thoughtful questions about Elena's nursing career and Sophia's studies. By the time Elena served her flan for dessert, even Sophia's initial weariness had transformed into obvious fascination with her new brother-in-law. "So you really built your tech division from scratch?" Sophia asked, leaning forward eagerly. "Against my father's advice. It was a calculated risk," Alexander replied, relaxed in a way Maya had rarely seen him. "Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when conventional wisdom says otherwise, like marrying my sister after knowing her for 3 weeks, Sophia teased. Alexander's eyes found Maya's across the table, something unreadable flickering in their blue depths. "Exactly like that. Best impulsive decision I've ever made."
Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks under his gaze, which seemed to hold more than just performance for her family's benefit. "You should see their apartment, Mama," Sophia continued excitedly. "It's probably bigger than our whole block." "Size isn't everything," Elena remarked, with pointed maternal insight. "A home needs warmth, not just square footage." "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Rodriguez," Alexander agreed, surprising Maya again. "My place never felt like a home until Maya moved in. She's transformed it completely." Elena nodded approvingly, then fixed Alexander with a more serious look. "And what about children? Maya's always wanted a family of her own someday." Maya!" protested, mortified. "It's a fair question," Alexander said calmly, though Maya noticed his hand tighten slightly around his water glass. "We're taking one step at a time, but I would be honored to have a family with Maya when we're both ready." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Maya found herself unable to focus, distracted by the casual way Alexander had discussed their fictional future children, a real home, a life together that extended beyond their one-month contract. Later, as Alexander insisted on helping Elena with the dishes, despite her protests, Maya found herself in the living room with Sophia, who was watching her with narrowed eyes. "Okay, spill," Sophia demanded in a whisper. "What's the real story? Because people like Alexander Westwood don't just suddenly marry normal people like us without some crazy backstory." "It's complicated," Maya hedged, avoiding her sister's penetrating gaze. "He's totally in love with you," Sophie observed, peering toward the kitchen, where Alexander was laughing at something Elena had said, like, genuinely hard eyes emoji in love. "It's actually kind of adorable watching Mr. Wall Street turn to mush whenever he looks at you." "You're imagining things," Maya insisted, though her heart skipped traitorously. "Am I? Because either he deserves an Oscar or he's the real deal." Sophia nudged her playfully. "And I saw how you look at him too. Don't even try to deny it." Before Maya could formulate a response, Alexander returned to the living room, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, looking surprisingly at home in the modest surroundings. "Your mother has invited us to Sunday dinner every week," he informed Maya with a bemused smile. "Apparently my empanada folding technique needs work." The casual domesticity of the moment, Alexander discussing weekly family dinners and cooking lessons with her mother, hit Maya with unexpected force. This glimpse of what could be, of a life where Alexander genuinely belonged in her world, was more painful than she had anticipated. As they prepared to leave, Elena pulled Maya aside, while Alexander helped Sophia hang a stubborn picture frame that had fallen. "He's a good man," Elena said quietly. "Watching Alexander with assessing eyes behind all that money and polish, I see someone who cares for you." Maya swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "It's still new, Mama. We're still figuring things out." "The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching," Elena continued, squeezing Maya's hand. "That can't be faked, Mia. That is the real thing." The ride back to Manhattan passed in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they were in the elevator, ascending to the penthouse, that Alexander finally spoke. "Your family is wonderful," he said quietly. "Especially your mother. Thank you."
"Being so good with them," Maya replied, studying his profile. "You didn't have to try so hard." Alexander glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "I didn't want to disappoint you." The simple admission hung between them as the elevator doors opened to the penthouse. They stepped inside, the familiar luxury, a stark contrast to the cozy home they'd just left. "I meant what I said, you know," Alexander continued as he loosened his tie. "You have made this place feel more like a home." Maya paused, caught off guard by his candor. "It's just an act, Alexander. In 3 weeks, I'll be gone, and you can return to your perfectly curated bachelor lifestyle." He stepped closer, close enough that she could detect the faint spice of his cologne. "What if I don't want to?" Maya's heart stuttered. "Don't want to what? Return to that life?" He clarified, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "What if these past 2 weeks have shown me that my previous existence was empty?" Maya took a step back, suddenly afraid of the intensity in his gaze, of the dangerous hope blooming in her chest. "Alexander,
We agreed this is business, not a romantic comedy, remember? His expression shuddered, professional masks sliding back into place so quickly she almost believed she'd imagined the vulnerability. Of course, forgive me. It's been a surprisingly emotional evening. We should get some rest, Maya suggested, retreating toward her room. Your father's dinner party is tomorrow night. Alexander nodded, all business again. You're right. I've arranged for a stylist to come in the morning. We should be especially convincing tomorrow. My father has invited the Blackwoods. Wonderful, Maya muttered. Another evening with Penelope's death glares. Alexander's lips twitched in a reluctant smile. If it's any consolation, you wear spousal devotion much more convincingly than she does. I'll take that as a professional compliment, Maya replied, attempting to restore their usual banter. Take it however you wish, Alexander said with sudden wariness. Good night, Maya. As her door closed between them, Maya leaned against it, her carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble. Playing Alexander's wife was becoming dangerously easy. Pretending to love him was starting to feel less like an act and more like a truth she was trying desperately to deny. Across the hallway, Alexander poured himself a scotch, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The evening with Maya's family had awakened something dormant within him, a longing for connection beyond business relationships and strategic alliances. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself wanting something he couldn't simply acquire through negotiation or purchase. He wanted Maya's smile. Her real smile, not the professional one she wore for their public appearances. He wanted her laughter in his kitchen every morning, and her teasing insights into his character. He wanted her family's warmth to become part of his life. Most dangerously of all, he was beginning to want their arrangement to be real. Richard Westwood's estate in the Hamptons was everything Maya had expected. Sprawling, impeccably maintained, and aggressively opulent. The kind of place where even the guest towels probably cost more than her monthly rent. Ready? Alexander asked as the driver opened their door. His hand found hers, warm and reassuring. Maya nodded, smoothing the emerald silk dress the stylist had selected for her as all ever be. Remember, my father will be looking for cracks in our story, Alexander murmured as they approached the mansion. He's invited the Blackwoods specifically to create tension. Remind me why we're subjecting ourselves to this again, Maya asked under her breath. Alexander's lips curved in a faint smile. Because if we convince them tonight, they might finally accept our marriage and leave us in peace for the remainder of our arrangement. The remainder. 2 more weeks until their contract ended and Maya returned to her real life. The thought felt less like a relief and more like an approaching loss with each passing day. Mr. and Mrs. Westwood? The butler greeted formally, ushering them into a grand foyer with soaring ceilings and marble floors. They followed him through the house to a terrace overlooking meticulously landscaped grounds that stretched toward the
ocean. Richard Westwood stood holding court among a small group of guests, his commanding presence drawing all eyes despite the spectacular view. "Alexander," Richard called, spotting them and the new Miss Westwood. "How good of you to join us." The gathering was smaller than Maya had anticipated, perhaps 20 guests mingling with champagne flutes, most watching their arrival with undisguised curiosity. "Father," Alexander greeted coolly, his arms sliding around Maya's waist, "thank you for the invitation." Richard's gaze settled on Maya, assessing her as one might evaluate a questionable investment. "Maya, you look lovely. I trust married life is treating you well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied with practiced warmth. "Your son is full of surprises." "Indeed he is," Richard agreed, though his tone suggested these surprises weren't always welcome. "The Blackwoods have been asking after you both. They were quite interested to hear about your sudden nuptials." As if on cue, Gregory Blackwood approached, Penelope gliding beside him in a striking white gown that looked deliberately bridal. "Alexander!" Gregory boomed, clapping him on the shoulder with excessive force. "And the mysterious bride. Congratulations are in order, though I must say you caught us all by surprise." "Life's greatest joys often arrive unexpectedly," Alexander replied smoothly, pulling Maya closer. "So I've heard," Penelope interjected, her smile sharp as a scalpel. "Though I've always found that hasty decisions rarely stand the test of time." Maya felt Alexander tense beside her. Time to change tactics. "Actually," she said, affecting a conspiratorial tone, "it wasn't nearly as hasty as everyone thinks. Alexander and I had been corresponding for almost a year before Bali." Alexander blinked in surprise before quickly recovering. "Maya was consulting on a charity project for the Westwood Foundation. Her insights were revolutionary." "How fascinating," Penelope drawled, clearly unconvinced. "And yet no one in your inner circle had heard her name until 2 weeks ago." "That's the beauty of modern romance," Maya countered, leaning into Alexander's side. "Sometimes the person who knows you best is someone entirely outside your usual world." Richard Westwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "A lovely sentiment, though I must say I'm surprised my son managed to keep such a significant relationship private for so long. Alexander has never been particularly skilled at discretion." The subtle dig hung in the air. Maya felt Alexander's arm tighten around her waist. "Perhaps I simply found something worth protecting from public scrutiny," Alexander replied, his gaze never leaving his father's face. "Not everything is a strategic move to be leveraged, father." The tension between father and son crackled like static electricity. Maya placed a gentle hand on Alexander's chest, a silent reminder of their purpose here. "Mr. Westwood," she addressed Richard directly, "your home is extraordinary. Perhaps you could show me more of it. I'd love to hear about its history." Her request, deliberately playing to Richard's pride in his possessions, had the desired effect. His expression softened marginally. "Of course, my dear. The East Wing houses my art collection. I think you'll find it educational." As Richard led Maya away, she caught Alexander's grateful glance. Divide and conquer, they'd discuss the strategy on the drive over. While she charmed his father, Alexander would handle the Blackwoods. "The original Monet was acquired at auction in '92, Richard explained as they moved through a gallery that would put some museums to shame. "The Degas is a personal favorite." Maya nodded appreciatively, though art had never been her area of expertise. "They're beautiful. You have remarkable taste." "I recognize quality when I see it," Richard replied, studying her rather than the paintings. "Which is why my son's sudden marriage has been perplexing." Here it comes, Maya thought, the real interrogation. "You seem like a lovely young woman," Richard continued, his tone deceptively casual. "But surely you understand my concern. Alexander has responsibilities to the company, to our family legacy. Responsibilities that may not align with whatever arrangement you two have come to." Maya maintained her composure, though his choice of words, arrangement, sent a chill down her spine. Did he know? "I understand family legacy is important."
"To you, Mr. Westwood," she replied carefully, "but so is your son's happiness. Isn't that part of your legacy to Richard?" His expression hardened. "Happiness is a luxury, my dear. Success requires sacrifice." "With all due respect," Maya countered, "I don't believe they're mutually exclusive." "An idealistic perspective," Richard dismissed. "If I may be frank, I've looked into your background, Maya. A small business owner from Queens with significant family financial burdens, no connections, no fortune, nothing to contribute to the Westwood empire except distraction." May felt heat rising to her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "Is that all you see when you look at your son? An asset in your empire?" Richard looked genuinely surprised by her directness. "I see his potential. Potential that's being squandered on romantic whims." "Perhaps what you see as whims, he sees as reclaiming his life," Maya suggested. "Alexander is brilliant at business, not because you forced him to be, but because it's in his nature. Trust that nature to guide his personal choices, too." Richard studied her with newfound interest.
You speak quite passionately for someone who's only known my son a short time. Some people you can know for years and never understand, Maya replied. Others you recognize immediately. A contemplative silence fell between them. Finally, Richard offered a slight nod of what might have been respect. "Let us rejoin the others," he suggested. "Dinner should be served soon." Dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare disguised as polite conversation. Maya navigated the complex table settings and subtle jabs with surprising grace, while Alexander fielded increasingly pointed questions about their relationship with practiced charm. "So, Maya," Penelope asked sweetly over the third course, "will you be taking an active role in Westwood Enterprises? Many corporate wives find charitable foundations a fulfilling way to contribute." "We haven't discussed Maya's role in the company," Alex interjected before she could respond, "though her business acumen is formidable." "How progressive," Penelope remarked with thinly veiled sarcasm. Maya maintained her beaded smile. "Actually, I believe in maintaining professional independence. My company continues to operate quite successfully." "Your event planning business," Gregory Blackwood supplied with barely concealed condescension. "How quaint." "I prefer strategic experience design," Maya corrected pleasantly. "And yes, it's been quite fulfilling, watching it grow from an idea into a thriving enterprise, much like Alexander's tech division, though on a different scale." Alexander's eyes gleamed with appreciation at her subtle reminder of his own entrepreneurial success, against his father's wishes. "Speaking of the tech division," Richard segued smoothly, "the board remains concerned about its integration with the potential Blackwood merger." "There won't be a Blackwood merger," Alexander stated flatly, "at least not the kind you and Gregory envisioned." An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. "Perhaps we should save business discussions for the office," Richard suggested tightly. "An excellent idea," Alexander agreed, "just as you should save matchmaking attempts for, well, never." Maya placed her hand over Alexander's on the table, feeling the tension in his fingers. He turned his hand to interlace her fingers, the gesture surprisingly intimate amid the battlefield of dinner conversation. "If you'll excuse us," Alexander said abruptly, standing and gently pulling Maya up with him. "I promised to show Maya the beach before sunset." Without waiting for permission, he guided her from the dining room, through the house, and out toward the private beach adjacent to the property. Neither spoke until they were well out of earshot, the sound of waves replacing the stifled conversation of the dinner table. "I apologize for that hasty exit," Alexander said finally, loosening his tie with obvious relief. "One more minute of Penelope's fake sympathy or my father's manipulation, and I might have caused a scene." "We're supposed to be newlyweds," Maya pointed out with a small smile. "Sneaking away from family gatherings is practically expected." Alexander's answering laugh held genuine amusement. "You were brilliant in there. The way you handled my father's art collection tour, which, by the way, is his
Favorite method of intimidating newcomers was masterful. "His not as subtle as he thinks," Maya replied, slipping off her heels to feel the cool sand between her toes. "He practically accused me of being a gold digger within the first 5 minutes." Alexander's expression darkened. "I'm sorry. He has no right to." "It's fine," Maya assured him. "I've heard worse from client families. At least your father speaks in complete sentences and uses a proper indoor voice." The absurdity of the comparison made Alexander smile again, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders. "Have I mentioned how remarkable you are?" "Not in the last 24 hours, Maya quipped, though the compliment warmed her more than it should. They walked in comfortable silence along the shoreline, the setting sun painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. Despite the disaster of dinner, despite the calculated facades they'd maintained all evening, this moment felt strangely genuine. "What did my father say to you during your private tour?" Alexander asked suddenly. Maya considered sugarcoating it, but honesty seemed more valuable. That I'm a distraction from your true potential? That happiness is a luxury successful people can't afford? Alexander's jaw tightened. Typical. I told him happiness and success aren't mutually exclusive, Maya continued, and that maybe he should trust you to make your own choices. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her with an unreadable expression. You defended me. Of course I did, Maya replied, surprised by his surprise. That's what partners do, even temporary ones. The word hung between them, a reminder of their arrangement's impending conclusion. Just 12 more days until they enacted their irreconcilable differences narrative and went their separate ways. Thank you, Alexander said quietly. Few people stand up to Richard Westwood. Maya shrugged, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. Maybe more people should. The ocean breeze picked up, sending a shiver through her despite the mild evening. Without hesitation, Alexander removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingering a moment too long. We should head back, Maya suggested, though she made no move to do so. The jacket smelled like him, expensive cologne with undertones of something uniquely Alexander. Probably, he agreed, equally still. Something had shifted between them. The carefully maintained boundaries of their business arrangement seemed suddenly flimsy, like lines drawn in sand that the tide was slowly erasing. Alexander, Maya began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected tenderness. Sometimes I forget this isn't real, he admitted, his voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. That feels dangerous. Maya's heart pounded against her ribs. Very dangerous. Would it be inappropriate, Alexander asked carefully, if I kissed you right now? Not for show, not for anyone's benefit, just because I've been thinking about it since the moment you walked into my office and told me my proposal was insane. The rational part of Maya's brain screamed warnings about professional boundaries, about the inevitable end date of their contract, about the impossibility of their worlds ever truly merging. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting Alexander's features in golden light, rationality felt distinctly overrated. Completely inappropriate, she whispered, stepping closer. That's not a no, he observed, his hand moving to cup her cheek. It's definitely not a no, Maya confirmed, closing the remaining distance between them. His lips met hers with unexpected gentleness, a tentative question rather than a statement. Maya answered by sliding her hands into his hair, drawing him closer, as the kiss deepened into something that defied all their carefully negotiated terms. This wasn't the practiced public kiss of their gala appearance, or the forehead peck for the benefit of photographers. This was something dangerously real, desire and connection that couldn't be explained away as performance. When they finally parted, breathless and slightly dazed, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. That wasn't in our contract, he murmured. Definitely a breach of terms, Maya agreed, making no attempt to move away from him.
We should probably return to the house before they send a search party, Alexander suggested, though his arms remained around her waist. Maya nodded reluctantly. Back to reality. Is that what that was? Alexander asked, gesturing vaguely back toward the mansion. Because this feels more real than anything that happened at that dinner table. The raw honesty in his voice caught Maya off guard. Alexander, I know, he interrupted softly. 12 more days, then back to our separate lives. I haven't forgotten. But as they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, in a gesture that required no audience, Maya wondered if either of them truly believed anymore that they could simply return to their lives before lines had been crossed, boundaries blurred beyond recognition. The most dangerous arrangement of all, she was beginning to realize, was with her own heart. You kissed her. James Porter's blunt statement echoed across Alexander's private office at Westwood Tower. His oldest friend leaned against the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, expression caught between amusement and concern. It's complicated, Alexander replied, not looking up from his computer screen where quarterly projections demanded his attention, or should have demanded his attention, if he could focus on anything than the memory of Maya's lips against his 3 nights ago. Complicated? James repeated, skeptically. You hired a woman to pretend to be your wife, and now you're developing actual feelings for her? I'd call that predictable, not complicated. Alexander shot him a care. Shouldn't you be running your legal department instead of critiquing my personal life? As your corporate counsel, and the only person who knows about this elaborate charade, I'd say critiquing your personal life falls squarely within my professional obligations. James pushed away from the window, dropping into the chair opposite Alexander's desk. The contract ends in 9 days. What's your plan? The plan hasn't changed, Alexander insisted, though the words felt hollow. We stage an amicable separation, creative differences. Maya returns to her life with financial security, and I continue mine without the Blackwood merger hanging over my head. And that kiss on the beach? A momentary lapse in judgment. James studied him with the penetrating gaze that had unnerved countless opposing attorneys. You're falling for her. Don't be ridiculous, Alexander scoffed, though the denial lacked conviction even to his own ears. Alexander, I've known you since we were 14. I've seen you with dozens of women, none of whom lasted more than a few months. But Maya, you look at her differently. It's called acting, Alexander countered. We're supposed to look convincingly in love. You don't look at her like that when others are watching, James observed quietly. You look at her like that when you think no one is paying attention. Alexander's fingers stilled over his keyboard. The truth of his friend's words hit uncomfortably close to home. Even if there were hypothetical feelings, Alexander conceded reluctantly, they're irrelevant. Our worlds are completely different. Her life is in Queens with her family. Mine is this. He gestured to the corporate empire surrounding them. Since when has Alexander Westwood let logistical challenges stand in his way? James challenged. You built an entire tech division because your father said it couldn't be done. This isn't a business problem I can solve with strategy and resources, Alexander replied with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Maya is genuine, real. Everything in my world is calculated and strategic. She deserves better than that. Maybe, James suggested carefully, she deserves the chance to make that decision herself. Before Alexander could respond, his intercom buzzed. Mr. Westwood? His assistant's voice came through the speaker. Miss Blackwood is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. Alexander and James exchanged looks of surprise. Send her in, Alexander instructed, straightening his tie automatically. James stood. Want me to stay? No, Alexander decided after a moment's consideration, but don't go far. As James exited through one door, Penelope Blackwood entered through another, impeccably styled in a designer suit that emphasized her willowy figure.
Calculated smile didn't reach her ice-blue eyes. Alexander, she greeted coolly. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. How generous of you to make time in your busy schedule of marital bliss. Penelope, Alexander returned evenly. What can I do for you? She settled gracefully into the chair James had vacated. I think we both know why I'm here. Enlighten me, anyway. Penelope sighed, as if disappointed by his pretense. This charade has gone on long enough, don't you think? The mysterious wife, the whirlwind romance. It was an admirable performance, but surely it's time to end the game. Alexander kept his expression neutral. My marriage is not a topic open for discussion, business or otherwise, please. Penelope scoffed. I had my suspicions from the start, but after observing you two at your father's dinner party, I'm certain she's not your type, Alexander. She's not even from our world. You don't know anything about my type, Alexander replied, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. I know you, Penelope countered confidently. We've moved in the same circle since childhood. I know you don't fall madly in love during spiritual journeys to Bali. I know you're strategic, not impulsive. And I know this suspiciously timed marriage appeared just as our fathers were finalizing merger details. Alexander's jaw tightened. Your point? My point,
Penelope continued, leaning forward slightly, is that I understand what you're doing, and I respect it. You're establishing your independence, making it clear you won't be a pawn in your father's chess game. Message received. She crossed her legs elegantly, her expression shifting to something more businesslike. But we both know this marriage isn't real, so let's discuss what happens next. Because despite your theatrical rebellion, the merger of our companies still makes perfect strategic sense. Alexander stood, his patience evaporating. You're overstepping, Penelope. My marriage to Maya is not a negotiating tactic. No. Penelope raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Then why is your wife still running her little business from a cramped office in Brooklyn? Why hasn't she moved her things into your penthouse? Why does she visit her family alone every Thursday and Sunday like clockwork, almost as if she has a visitation schedule rather than a marriage? Ice formed in Alexander's veins. She'd been having Maya followed. Get out, he said, quietly, dangerously. Penelope remained seated, unfazed by his anger. I'm not your enemy, Alexander. I'm offering you a graceful exit. End this charade on your terms before someone else exposes it. We can structure the Westwood-Blackwood merger to preserve your autonomy. Your tech division remains yours. Complete independence from both our fathers. You're threatening me? Alexander observed, his voice deadly calm. I'm negotiating, Penelope corrected. What we both want is freedom from our father's machinations. We can help each other achieve that. She stood, smoothing her already immaculate suit. Think about it. I'll give you a week to start untangling this arrangement of yours, then we can discuss terms that benefit us both. With a confident smile that didn't reach her eyes, Penelope saw Beats soared toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. Oh, and Alexander, your wife is having lunch with her sister at Pierre's Bistro right now. Might want to warn her about the company she keeps. One of her ex-clients just happened to sit at the next table. Curious coincidence, isn't it? The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like a gunshot in the silent office. Alexander grabbed his phone, dialing Maya's number with unsteady fingers, straight to voicemail. He tried again with the same result. James, he called, striding toward the door, get the car ready now. I still can't believe you're married to Alexander Westwood, Sophia marveled, dipping a French fry into ketchup. It's like you're living in a movie. Maya smiled weakly, pushing her salad around her plate. The charming bistro, with its sidewalk tables, had seemed a perfect spot for a casual lunch with her sister, far, far from the scrutinizing eyes of Manhattan high society. It's definitely been cinematic, she agreed, unable to share just how apt the comparison truly was. Their arrangement had the elements of a romantic comedy, fake relationship,
Growing feelings, inevitable separation. In the final act, the only missing piece was the happily ever after ending that seemed increasingly impossible. Earth to Maya? Sophia waved a hand in front of her face. You're doing that thing again where you zone out thinking about him. Sorry, Maya apologized, forcing herself back to the present. Work stuff on my mind. Speaking of work, Sophia said, leaning forward conspiratorially, are you really teeing your business? I mean, you're married to a literal billionaire now. Maya stiffened, the question hitting a nerve. Of course I'm teeing it. My company is important to me. No judgment, Sophia assured her quickly. It's just, most people would be retiring to a life of luxury, travel, and charity galas. I'm not most people, Maya replied, more sharply than intended. That's why he fell for you, Sophia observed with surprising insight. You're real in a world of fake people. The irony of her sister's statement almost made Maya laugh. If only Sophia knew just how fake her entire marriage was, or had started out at least. Now, Maya wasn't sure what was real anymore. The lines had blurred beyond recognition. That kiss on the beach had changed everything. For 3 days, she and Alexander had danced around each other in the penthouse, maintaining a careful distance while electricity crackled between them.
Neither mentioned the kiss, as if acknowledging it would make their predicament even more impossible. Because, despite the growing feelings Maya couldn't deny, the fundamental problem remained. In 9 days, their contract would end. Maya would return to her normal life, Alexander to his, and this beautiful, painful fantasy would dissolve like morning mist. "Do you love him?" Sophia asked, suddenly jerking Maya from her thoughts. "What?" "Alexander," Sophia clarified, studying her sister's face. "Do you love him? Because sometimes when you talk about him, get this look like you're both happy and terrified at the same time." Maya's throat tightened. How could she possibly answer that? How could she explain that, yes, against all logic and professional boundaries, she had fallen in love with her client, a man who lived in a different universe, whose life was incompatible with hers in every measurable way? "It's complicated," she finally managed. Sophia rolled her eyes. "All adults say that when they're avoiding the question." "Then, yes," Maya admitted, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "Yes, I think I do love him, but that doesn't mean it's going to work." Sophia frowned. "What are you talking about? You're already married." "Marriage isn't a magic fix for real-world problems," Maya said quietly. "We come from different worlds, Sophia. His life is board meetings and billion-dollar deals. Mine is small business struggles and family dinners in Queens." "So?" Sophia challenged. "Mom always says love finds a way. Mom also says winning the lottery would solve all our problems. But that doesn't make it realistic," Maya countered, though she immediately regretted the cynicism in her voice. Sophia studied her with concern. "Is something wrong? Did you two have a fight?" Before Maya could formulate a response, a familiar figure appeared at their table, casting a shadow over their plates. "Tim!" Maya blinked in surprise, recognizing one of her former clients, a mid-level executive who had hired her as a +1 for his company holiday party 6 months ago. "What are you doing here?" "Tim, Maya, Rodriguez," Tim greeted with uncomfortable formality. "Or should I say Mrs. Westwood now? Quite the career advancement." Maya tensed at the tone. "Tim, this is my sister, Sophia. Sophia, Tim is a former client." Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. She knew about Maya's business, though not all the details of her services. "Funny running into you here," Tim continued, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I was just having lunch when I overheard your rather illuminating conversation." Maya's blood ran cold. How much had he heard? "It was nice seeing you," she said firmly, reaching for her purse. "We were just leaving, actually," Tim said, lowering his voice. "I was hoping to discuss a business proposition with you. Your unique services have clearly paid off dramatically, from hired companion to billionaire's wife in one easy step. Impressive." Sophia's eyes widened in confusion, while Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks. Not embarrassment.
"Anger, you're misunderstanding the situation," Maya stated coolly, standing to face him. "Please excuse us." Tim Cand caught her wrist. "A woman I hired to pretend to be my date is now pretending to be Alexander Westwood's wife. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a fascinating career trajectory. I wonder what the business papers would make of that story." "Let go of my sister," Sophia demanded, rising to her feet. "Is there a problem here?" Alexander's voice, cold as steel, cut through the tension. Maya turned to find him standing behind him, his expression thunderous as his gaze fixed on the hand still gripping Ma's wrist. "Alexander," she breathed, relief and apprehension washing over her in equal measure. Tim released her immediately, turning to face the newcomer with visible shock. "Mr. Westwood, I didn't realize." Clearly, Alexander interrupted, moving to stand protectively beside Maya. "You were saying something about my wife." The color drained from Tim's face. "Just congratulating her on your marriage. Small world running into her here." "Very small," Alexander agreed, his tone making it clear he didn't believe a word. "Small enough that everyone's business tends to become known eventually, including harassment of women in public restaurants." Tim swallowed hard. "No harassment intended, just catching up with an old friend."
"We're not friends," Maya stated firmly, "and I'd appreciate if you'd leave us alone." Alexander's hand settled at the small of her back, a gesture both possessive and protective. "I believe my wife asked you to leave." Without another word, Tim retreated to his table, hastily throwing cash down before making a quick exit. "Sophia," Alexander acknowledged Maya's sister with a nod, "I apologize for interrupting your lunch." "Are you kidding? That was better than a movie," Sophia replied, though her expression remained concerned as she looked between them. "Who was that creep?" "No one important," Maya assured her. "Alexander, how did you know where to find us?" A shadow crossed his face. "We need to talk privately." The gravity in his tone sent a chill through her. "Is everything okay?" "Not here," he replied quietly. "James is waiting with the car. We can drop Sophia wherever she needs to go." Maya recognized the urgency in his manner. Something was very wrong. "So, rain check on dessert?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Sophia glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. "Sure, everything okay with you too?" "Just a small business matter," Alexander assured her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing to worry about." But as they settled into the back of Alexander's sleek town car, the rigid set of his shoulders and the troubled look in his eyes told Maya that there was, in fact, plenty to worry about. After dropping Sophia at her dorm with promises to call later, Alexander finally broke the tense silence. "Penelope Blackwood came to see me today," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "She knows, Maya, about our arrangement. She's been having you followed." The blood drained from Maya's face. "What? She knows your schedule, your movements. She knows about your business." Alexander's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "She's threatening to expose the truth unless I agree to end our arrangement and negotiate merger terms with her." That was no coincidence at the restaurant, Maya realized with dawning horror. Tim showing up, bringing up my business. "A warning shot," Alexander confirmed grimly, "demonstrating how easily she can disrupt your life." Maya felt sick, the implications crashing over her. What do we do? Alexander's gaze met hers, his blue eyes dark with determination and something else. Fear, perhaps, or regret. "We need to accelerate our timeline. End the arrangement now, before Penelope can expose us on her terms." The words hit Maya like a physical blow, though she knew they were logical, inevitable even. This was always going to end. She just foolishly allowed herself to forget that fact over the past weeks. "You're right," she managed, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the crumbling sensation in her chest. "We should activate the exit strategy immediately." Alexander looked away, his profile rigid with tension. "I never meant to put you in this position. To endanger your reputation, your business. I'm a big girl, Alexander. I knew the risks when I signed the contract."
Attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. "At least we fooled them for a while, right?" His hand found hers in the space between them, fingers intertwining with unexpected gentleness. "Maya, about what happened at the beach." "Don't," she interrupted, unable to bear hearing him explain away that kiss as another mistake, another complication in their already complicated arrangement. "It's okay. We got caught up in the moment. It happens." Alexander studied her face, something like pain flickering in his eyes. "Is that what you think it was?" The car pulled to a stop outside his building before she could respond, the moment fracturing as the driver opened the door. Reality was crashing back in, the fantasy dissolving around them in a matter of days, perhaps even hours. Maya would pack her bags and leave the penthouse for the last time, their brief marriage of convenience ending as abruptly as it had begun. What terrified her most wasn't the professional fallout or Penelope's threats. It was the knowledge that, despite the artificial beginning, what she felt for Alexander had become heart-wrenchingly real. A truth that would make their inevitable separation not just a business transaction concluded, but a genuine heartbreak. She wasn't sure she was prepared to endure. "Irreconcilable differences." Richard Westwood's voice rose with incredulity as he paced his office. "After barely a month of marriage, are you actually trying to break the family record for shortest matrimony?
Or is this just another of your impulsive decisions? Alexander stood by the window, his expression carefully neutral despite the storm raging inside him. The decision was mutual, Father. Sometimes relationships don't work out the way we expect. Nothing about this farce of a marriage has made sense from the beginning, Richard countered, stopping to fix his son with a penetrating stare. The mysterious elopement, the wife from nowhere, and now a separation before the ink has dried on the marriage certificate. What game are you playing, Alexander? No game, Alexander replied evenly. Maya and I realized we rushed into something without fully understanding the implications. We're handling it maturely. Richard scoffed. Mature would have been considering those implications before exchanging vows. The board meeting is in 3 days. How do you propose I explain to our shareholders that my son's marital status changes more frequently than our quarterly forecasts? Alexander clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to point out that his personal life shouldn't factor into shareholder discussions at all. Tell them the truth, that sometimes relationships don't work out and we're prioritizing an amicable separation over a prolonged pretense. The word pretense slipped out before he could catch it. His father's eyes narrowed. Interesting choice of words, Richard observed. Penelope Blackwood called me yesterday. She seemed to think you might have news about a change in your personal situation. Ice formed in Alexander's veins. So Penelope had already been laying groundwork with his father. Penelope should focus on her own affairs rather than speculating about mine, Alexander replied coolly. Is there something I should know, Alexander? Richard pressed. Because if this marriage was some kind of strategy to avoid the Blackwood merger, that would be not only childish, but potentially damaging to the company. Alexander met his father's gaze unflinchingly. My marriage to Maya was personal, not strategic. Its dissolution is equally personal. It wasn't entirely a lie. Whatever had begun as strategy had evolved into something far more complex, something Alexander was still struggling to define, as Maya packed her belongings in uncomfortable silence back at the penthouse. Where is she now, this soon-to-be ex-wife of yours? Richard asked. Preparing to move out, Alexander replied, checking his watch, which is why I need to cut this conversation short. Richard studied his son with calculating eyes. You know, for someone ending a marriage of convenience, you look remarkably inconvenienced by the process, almost as if you regret it. Alexander stiffened, unsettled by his father's unexpected perceptibility. Goodbyes are rarely pleasant, even when necessary. Indeed, Richard agreed, his tone softening slightly. For what it's worth, I thought
Handled herself well at dinner. Genuine, refreshingly direct. The unexpected comment caught Alexander off guard. She did not, the right woman for a Westwood, of course. Richard continued pragmatically, but not without admirable qualities. Alexander's PA snapped. What exactly makes someone right for a Westwood, Father? Money? Connections? Strategic business value? Because Maya has more integrity and intelligence than most of the suitable women in our social circle combined. Richard's eyebrows rose at his son's vehemence. Then why are you ending the marriage? The question hit with devastating precision, leaving Alexander momentarily speechless. Why indeed? Because a contract was expiring? Because their worlds were too different? Because he was afraid? Terrified, really, that what had grown between them couldn't survive outside the artificial construct of their arrangement. It's complicated, he finally managed. Richard's laugh held no humor. The universal explanation when one can't face the truth. He moved behind his desk, effectively dismissing his son. Handle your divorce discreetly. The tech division presentation is Monday, and I expect you fully focused. Alexander nodded stiffly and turned to leave. Alexander, his father called as he reached the door. When he turned back, Richard's expression was uncharacteristically thoughtful. Your mother once told me that in matters of consequence, the right decision usually feels like the most difficult one.
Coming from Richard Westwood, it was practically a hallmark card of emotional wisdom. Alexander stood frozen, unsure how to respond to this glimpse of the father he'd rarely seen since his mother's death. "I'll keep that in mind," he finally said, and left before the moment could become any more disorienting. Maya sealed the last box with packing tape, surveying the guest room that had been her home for the past month. It looked much as it had been when she arrived, impersonal, pristine, devoid of any evidence she had ever existed there, just like their marriage would be in a matter of hours. The press release had already been drafted by Alexander's PR team, a mutual decision, deep respect remaining between parties, privacy requested during this difficult time. Clean, simple, civilized. Everything their actual parting was not. Maya hadn't seen Alexander since they'd returned from the confrontation with Tim yesterday. He'd retreated to his home office for a series of emergency meetings with James and his PR team, orchestrating their separation with the same efficiency he applied to corporate acquisitions. Maya had spent the evening calling her mother and sister, crafting a palatable version of their sudden marital collapse that wouldn't raise too many questions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Are you sure you don't want to come help? This makes no sense, Maya. Yesterday you basically admitted you love him." Maya sighed, typing back. "It's for the best. I'll explain everything later, promise." Though she had no idea how she would ever explain this situation without revealing the humiliating truth that her marriage had been fake from the start, a business arrangement with an expiration date that had come due. The penthouse door opened and closed, signaling Alexander's return. Maya steeled herself, pacting on a calm expression as she stepped into the hallway. He stood in the living room, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His tie was loosened, his hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, a nervous habit she'd come to recognize during their time together. "You're packed," he observed, his eyes landing on the suitcases by the door. Maya nodded. "Just finishing up. How did the meeting with your father go?" "About as expected. Disapproval, interrogation, thinly veiled threats about shareholder confidence." Alexander's attempt at a casual shrug failed to mask his tension. "The usual father-son bonding experience?" Maya attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The car should be here in about 20 minutes. I thought it would be better if I stayed with Sophia for a few days while I find a new place." "Maya, about the contract," Alexander began. "I've already transferred the final payment," she interrupted quickly. "As agreed." She couldn't bear to discuss financial details now. Not when the nature of their transaction felt so at odds with the chaotic emotions swirling inside her. Alexander's expression tightened. "That's not what I was going to say." "Alexander, please," Maya said softly. "Let us not make this harder than it needs to be. We knew this day was coming from the beginning." "Did we?" he challenged, taking a step closer. "Because I'm starting to think we had no idea what we were actually agreeing to." Maya forced herself to meet his intense gaze. "We agreed to a temporary arrangement with mutual benefits. It worked. Your father won't force the Blackwood merger now that Penelope has exposed our situation, and I have the financial security I needed for my family. Mission accomplished?" "Is that all this was to you?" Alexander asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. "A mission? A business transaction?" "That's all it was supposed to be," Maya corrected, her carefully maintained composure threatening to crack. "You made that very clear from the start, and things never change. People never change." Alexander ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Because I'm standing here wondering how I'm supposed to go back to my life before you, and I'm coming up empty." The raw honesty in his voice stole hold Maya's breath. "Alexander, I know," he interrupted, pacing now. "I know all the reasons this can't work. Our worlds, my family's expectations, the fact that we started with a lie. But what if those aren't insurmountable problems? What if they're just challenges to overcome?" Hope flickered dangerously in Maya's chest. "What are you saying?" Alexander stopped pacing, turning to face her with newfound resolve. "I'm saying I don't want this to end. Not like this. Not because of a contract expiration or Penelope's threats. If it ends, it should be because we choose it to end, not because we're following some exit strategy drafted by corporate lawyers." "It's not that simple," Maya argued, though everything in her yearned to believe it could be. "Your father, your company can adapt.
Alexander finished firmly. I've spent my entire life meeting others' expectations, making the rational, strategic choice. And where has it gotten me? A perfect penthouse that never felt like home until you were in it? A successful career that means nothing if I have no one to share it with? He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. The one truly impulsive decision I've made, hiring you, somehow led to the most genuine connection I've ever experienced. Tell me that's just coincidence. Tell me you don't feel it too. Maya's eyes burned with unshed tears. Of course I feel it, but feeling something doesn't make it practical or possible. Since when are you afraid of a challenge? Alexander demanded, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. You stood up to my father, you faced down Penelope Blackwood, you built a business from nothing. You're the strongest person I know, Maya. And you're the most frustratingly complex man I've ever met, she countered, unable to stop a watery laugh from escaping. 1 minute all cold business, the next quoting romantic philosophy on a beach. His eyes softened, a smile tugging at his lips. See? You already understand me better than anyone. Their moment of connection was shattered by the buzzing of Alexander's phone. He glanced at it with obvious frustration. Penelope, he muttered. Third call today. Maya felt reality crashing back in. She won't stop, Alexander. She'll keep digging, keep threatening. Your father will find out the whole truth eventually. Let him, Alexander said with sudden determination. Maybe it's time for the truth anyway. Before Maya could respond, the doorman called up to announce her car had arrived. The timer on their fantasy had run out. I should go, she said quietly, pulling her hands from his grasp. Alexander looked stricken. Maya, please, just think about what I've said about giving us a real chance. What exactly are you proposing, Alexander? Maya asked, needing clarity amid the emotional chaos. Another arrangement? A real marriage this time? Or just seeing where things go? I don't know, he admitted with brutal honesty. I just know that letting you walk out that door feels like the biggest mistake of my life. The intercom buzzed again, more insistent this time. I have to go, Maya said, gathering her courage as she reached for her
Suitcases. Alexander moved to help her, his fingers brushing hers as they both reached for the same handle. The simple contact sent electricity racing up her arm. Maya, he said softly, her name a plea on his lips. I need time, she finally said, meeting his gaze directly. This has all been so unreal. I need to find my footing again, to think clearly without, she gestured to the penthouse around them, without all this clouding my judgment. Understanding dawned in his eyes, mingled with cautious hope. Time. I can give you that. I'm not promising anything, Maya warned, even as her heart raced with possibilities. I'm not asking for promises, Alexander replied. Just a chance, Dance. A real one this time. The elevator doors opened, waiting to carry her away from the fantasy world they'd created together. Maya stepped inside, turning to face Alexander one last time. Goodbye, Alexander, she said quietly. Not goodbye, he corrected, his gaze intense and unwavering, just until later. As the elevator doors closed between them, Maya let the tears she'd been holding back finally fall. Everything was falling apart, exactly according to plan. Their fake marriage dissolving on schedule, their arrangement concluding as contracted. So why did it feel like her heart was breaking for real? Sophia's dormitory room at NYU was approximately 1/8 the size of Alexander's penthouse, with 2 narrow beds, desks crammed against opposite walls, and barely enough floor space to open a suitcase. Maya sat cross-legged on her sister's bed, surrounded by textbooks and remnants of college life that felt worlds away from the luxury she'd grown accustomed to over the past month. So, let me get this straight, Sophia said, pacing the tiny space between their beds. Your marriage to Alexander was fake? A business arrangement to help him avoid marrying Penelope Blackwood? Maya nodded miserably. I told you it was complicated. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it, Sophia exclaimed. You pretended to be his wife for money, Maya? That's... I know how it sounds, Maya interrupted, her cheeks burning with shame. But I needed the money from Mom's treatments and your tuition. It seemed like a simple solution at the time. Sophia dropped onto her desk chair, visibly processing this revelation. And somewhere along the way, you actually fell in love with him. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded again, unable to deny the truth any longer. Completely unprofessional of me. To her surprise, Sophia burst out laughing. Only you would be worried about professional ethics in this scenario. Her expression softened as she took in her sister's misery. For what it's worth, he's definitely in love with you too. It's not that simple, Maya protested weakly. It never is, Sophia acknowledged. But I saw you two together at family dinner. At the restaurant yesterday. Whatever started as fake clearly became real somewhere along the way. Even if that's true, Maya argued, our worlds are completely different. His father would never accept me as an actual daughter-in-law. His business associate would always see me as an outsider. Eventually, Alexander would resent the complications I bring to his life. Or, Sophia countered, you could stop making decisions for everyone else and actually give it a chance. Maya opened her mouth to argue further when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Her stomach dropped as she read the headline, breaking, Alexander Westwood and mystery wife separate after whirlwind marriage. The PR statement had been released. It was official now. Before she could fully process this, another message appeared, this one from her mother. Mija, what is happening? The news says you and Alexander are separating. Call me. As if on cue, Maya's phone began ringing, her mother's number flashing on the screen. Reality was crashing in from all sides. I have to take this, Maya said, standing to seek privacy in the hallway. Maya, Sophia called as she reached the door. When she turned back, her sister's expression was uncharacteristically serious. For someone who helps other people create convincing fictions, you're really bad at recognizing the truth when it's right in front of you. Those words echoed in Maya's mind as she stepped into the hallway to break her mother's heart with half-truths and evasions. A fitting end to a relationship that had begun the same way. Meanwhile, across
downtown, Alexander Westwood stood in his suddenly empty penthouse, staring at the door Maya had walked through, wondering if he just let the best thing that had ever happened to him slip away, because they'd both been too afraid to believe that something that began as pretense could transform into something genuinely, terrifyingly real. 3 weeks had passed since Maya had walked out of Alexander's penthouse. 3 weeks of dodging reporters, fielding concerned calls from her mother, and trying to rebuild the walls around her heart that Alexander Westwood had somehow dismantled without her permission. She'd thrown herself back into her business with single-minded focus, though the irony wasn't lost on her, arranging fake relationships for others, while her own fake-turned-real relationship lay in ruins. The tabloids had moved on to fresher scandals. The divorce papers were being processed discreetly by James Porter, and life was supposedly returning to normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. "You look terrible," remarked Charlie, Maya's assistant, as she placed another stack of client requests on Maya's desk in their small Brooklyn office. "When was the last time you slept?" "Sleep is overrated," Maya replied, rubbing her eyes, "and technically unnecessary for survival." "You know what else is unnecessary for survival? Pretending you're not miserable." Charlie perched on the edge of the desk, fixing Maya with a pointed stare. "You haven't mentioned his name once since you came back, but your browser history is full of Westwood Industries press releases." Maya quickly closed her laptop. "Client research." Charlie hummed skeptically. "And I suppose the fact that Alexander Westwood is giving a keynote at the Tech Innovation Summit today is completely irrelevant to your interest?" Maya's head snapped up. "How did—" "It's all over the business news," Charlie interrupted, sliding her phone across the desk to show Maya the headline. "Westwood to announce major company restructuring at Summit. Rumors of split from father's control." Maya's heart raced as she scanned the article. Alexander was making a move to separate his tech division from his father's control, something he'd mentioned wanting to do for years but never had the leverage to accomplish. "This has nothing to do with me," Maya said firmly, pushing the phone back to Charlie. "Then you'll be completely uninterested to know that the summit is happening at the Archer Hotel, just 3 blocks from here, starting in—" Charlie glanced at her watch. "45 minutes?" Maya kept her expression carefully neutral. "As I said, not relevant to my day." "Of course not," Charlie agreed with exaggerated sincerity, "just like it's not relevant that the Robinson wedding consultation I scheduled for this afternoon mysteriously disappeared from your calendar." "You didn't," Maya gasped.
I did, Charlie confirmed unapologetically, because watching you mope around this office for another day might actually kill me. Go hear what he has to say, Maya. For closure, if nothing else. Maya wavered, torn between professional pride and the undeniable pull to see Alexander again, even from a distance. What would I even wear to a tech summit? I'm not exactly dressed for it. She gestured to her simple blouse and skirt. Funny you should ask. She reached behind the door and pulled out a garment bag. The green dress you wore to the Thornfield Gala was all over social media. I called in a favor from my friend at Saks. You're meddling, Maya accused, even as she reached for the bag. Someone has to, Charlie replied with a shrug. You arranged everyone else's happiness. Maybe it's time someone arranged yours. The Archer Hotel's grand ballroom was packed with tech industry titans, investors, and media. When Maya slipped in through a side door, she found a spot at the back, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar, but with a clear view of the stage where Alexander would soon appear. Her palms were sweating, her heart racing with equal parts anticipation and anxiety. What was she doing here? What did she expect to happen? Alexander had asked for a chance, yes, but 3 weeks of silence had passed. For all she knew, he'd moved on, decided their brief connection wasn't worth the complications after all. The lights dimmed, and a woman walked to the podium.
A spotlight hit the podium. Ma's breath caught as Alexander walked on stage, impeccable in a tailored navy suit that highlighted the breadth of his shoulders. He looked tired, she thought, the same kind of bone exhaustion she saw in her own mirror each morning. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice instantly commanding the room's attention. "Thank you for joining me today." As he launched into his presentation about innovation and adaptation in the tech industry, Maya found herself studying the subtle changes in him, the slight loosening of his usual rigid posture, the occasional smile that seemed more genuine than his polished corporate mask. Small differences, perhaps, only she would notice. "Today, I'm announcing that Westwood Tech will be establishing itself as an independent entity," Alexander stated, causing a ripple of surprised murmurs through the audience. "While maintaining strategic partnerships with Westwood Financial, we will operate under separate leadership and direction." Flashbulbs popped as reporters captured the moment. Maya knew what this meant. Alexander was breaking away from his father's control, establishing his own path forward, exactly what he'd wanted for years, but never had the courage to pursue directly. "This restructuring represents more than a corporate strategy," Alexander continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "It represents a personal philosophy I've recently come to embrace." Something in his tone changed, becoming more intimate despite the large venue. "For most of my life, I've made decisions based on expectations rather than truth. I've prioritized appearance over substance, strategy over authenticity." He paused, and for a heart-stopping moment, Maya thought his eyes locked with hers across the crowded room. "I've learned, rather belatedly, that the most valuable arrangements in life are not the ones crafted for external approval, but those based on genuine connection and mutual respect." The business audience looked slightly confused by this philosophical detour, but Maya felt each word like a direct message to her heart. "Sometimes," Alexander continued, "the most strategic decision is to admit when you've made a mistake. My greatest recent mistake wasn't in a business merger or product launch. It was in letting fear of vulnerability, of change, of potential failure, prevent me from fighting for something irreplaceable." Maya's throat tightened as Alexander seemed to look directly at her hiding spot. "Today's announcement is about more than corporate restructuring. It's about aligning my professional life with a personal realization that true value lies not in what looks good on paper, but in what feels right in reality." The rest of his speech continued with more traditional business content, but Maya barely heard it. Her mind raced with implications, with possibilities, with hope she tried so hard to extinguish. When the presentation ended to enthusiastic applause, Maya slipped out before the crowds, needing air, needing space to think. She made her way to the hotel's rooftop garden, blissfully empty during the conference sessions below.
The Manhattan skyline stretched before her, Alexander's penthouse visible in the distance. Had his words been meant for her, or was she projecting, hearing what she wanted to hear in a standard corporate speech? "You came." Maya froze, then turned slowly to find Alexander standing by the garden entrance, his tie loosened, his expression cautiously hopeful. "Charlie may have arranged it," Maya admitted, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll have to send Charlie flowers," Alexander replied, taking a tentative step closer. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to wonder if you've hired a speechwriter with a romantic streak," Maya said, her attempt at lightness undermined by the tremor in her voice. Alexander's lips quirked in a half-smile. Every word was mine. Perhaps not very corporate, but honest. "Honesty," Maya repeated softly. "That would be a change for us." "I'd like to try it," Alexander said, moving closer until just a few feet separated them. "Starting now. I've missed you, Maya, more than I thought possible." The simple admission pierced straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "I've missed you too," she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them.
But missing someone doesn't solve practical problems." "No," Alexander agreed, "it doesn't. But it can provide motivation to find solutions." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar nervous gesture that always betrayed when he was stepping outside his comfort zone. "I've spent these 3 weeks restructuring more than just my company. I've been reorganizing my entire life." "What does that mean, exactly?" Maya asked, hope and caution warring within her. "It means I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn," he replied, watching her eyes widen in surprise. "It means I've been having dinner with your mother every Sunday, helping her research new treatment options. It means I've been meeting with your sister to understand what supporting her education really entails." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You've been seeing my family without me?" "I needed to understand your world," Alexander explained earnestly, "not as a tourist passing through, but as someone who might belong there. Your mother makes a compelling case for your forgiveness, by the way." Despite herself, Maya laughed. "I'm sure she does." "I've also had some illuminating conversations with my father," Alexander continued, his expression turning more serious, "about my mother, about what they had together, about what he lost when she died. And," Maya prompted softly, "and he said something surprising. He said that wealth without purpose becomes a prison, and that he's watched me building my own cell for years." Alexander's gaze held her steadily. "He said my mother would have liked you, just as I told you that night at the beach." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes. "Alexander, I'm not asking you to come back to my world," he interrupted gently. "I'm asking if there's room in yours for me, not as Alexander Westwood, billionaire CEO, but just as Alexander, a man who started with a lie, but found himself telling the most unexpected truth, that he's in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying in their simplicity. "I need you to be very clear about what you're proposing," Maya said carefully, her heart hammering against her ribs, "because we've had enough miscommunication to last a lifetime." Alexander closed the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I'm proposing a new arrangement. No contracts, no expiration dates, no exit strategies. Just us figuring it out together, one day at a time." "That sounds suspiciously like a real relationship," Maya observed, trying to mask how her hands trembled in his. "Terrifying, isn't it?" Alexander agreed with a soft laugh. "For a man who spent his life avoiding real connections, it's absolutely petrifying. But the alternative, life without you, has proven far worse." Maya studied his face, searching for any trace of hesitation or doubt. She found only sincerity, and a vulnerability he'd never allowed anyone else to see. "What about Penelope? Your father? The society pages will have a field day with this." "Penelope has moved on to terrorizing a shipping magnate from Greece," Alexander replied dryly. "My father is adjusting to the idea that his legacy might include my happiness, after all. And the press can write whatever they want. I'm done living for public consumption." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch achingly gentle. "The only opinion that matters to me now is yours. So, Maya Rodriguez, what do you say? Will you give this arrangement, this real one, a chance?" Maya took a deep breath, years of practical caution warring with the undeniable truth in her heart. "I have conditions," she said finally. Alexander's lips twitched. "Of course you do. I keep my company, my independence. My family remains my priority," Maya stated firmly. "Agreed without reservation," Alexander replied. "I'm not moving back into that soulless penthouse," she continued. "Hence the Brooklyn brownstone," he conceded, "though I was hoping you might help make it less soulless and more homey." Maya thought a smile. "And I want honesty. Complete, sometimes uncomfortable honesty, even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," Alexander agreed solemnly. "Any other terms I should be aware of?" Maya took a step closer, eliminating the last space between them. "Just one more. I need you to hear it again, not as part of a negotiation or a grand speech, but just for me."
Eyes with gentle reverence, he cued her face in his hands. "I love you, Maya Rodriguez, not for what you do for me or how you make me look, but for who you are, the woman who challenged me, surprised me, and made me want to be worthy of her." The walls around Maya's heart crumbled completely. "I love you too," she whispered, "despite my better judgment, despite every practical consideration, despite our absolutely insane beginning." Alexander's smile was radiant. "So we have an agreement." "We have something much better than that," Maya replied, rising on tiptoes to bring her lips to his. "We have the truth." Their kiss held none of the hesitation of the beach, none of the performance of their public appearances. It was real and raw and full of promise, a perfect beginning to an arrangement with no expiration date. 6 months later, "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, straightening Alexander's tie as they stood outside her mother's house in Queen. Music and laughter spilled from inside, where both their worlds had collided, for Sophia's graduation celebration. "For the 100th time, yes," Alexander assured her, capturing her fidgeting hands in his. "Your mother's empanadas are worth enduring small talk with my father any day." Through the window, they could see Richard Westwood engaged in animated conversation with Elena Rodriguez, an unlikely friendship that had developed gradually over Sunday dinners. Nearby, Sophia was showing James Porter photos on her phone while various neighbors and relatives mingled throughout the modest home. "It's just so surreal," Maya murmured. 6 months ago, this would have seemed impossible." 6 months ago, I didn't know what I was missing," Alexander replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now I can't imagine any other life." The transition hadn't been without challenges. The press had indeed had a field day with their reconciliation, spinning theories from the ridiculous to the alarmingly close to truth. Alexander's new independence from his father's company had required exhausting negotiations. Maya's business had faced scrutiny from clients and competitors alike. But through it all, they'd held to their fundamental agreement: honesty, respect, and the courage to choose each other every day. Not because of any arrangement, but because what had begun as pretense had transformed into the most genuine connection either had ever known. "We should go in," Maya said, though she made no move to leave the peaceful bubble of their moment on the porch. "One more thing," Alexander said. Reaching into his pocket, "I have a proposal to discuss." Maya's eyes widened as he produced a small velvet box. "Alexander, not that kind of proposal," he clarified with a smile. "Not yet, anyway. We agreed to take things at our own pace, remember?" Curious, Maya opened the box to find not a ring, but a key. "The brownstone renovations are finally complete," Alexander explained, "including your home office and the guest suite for your mother's weekend visits. I thought perhaps it might be time to discuss a new living arrangement, one that doesn't involve you commuting between your apartment and mine 3 days a week." Maya examined the key, emotion welling in her throat. "Are you asking me to move in with you? Officially?"
I'm asking you to build a home with me, Alexander corrected softly. Not my home or your home. Ours. Maya closed her hand around the key, marveling at how something so simple could represent such a monumental shift in both their lives, from a business arrangement to a shared future, from pretense to truth, from two separate worlds to one they were creating together. "I'd like that," she said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Not for show, not for anyone's benefit but their own. Inside the house, Elena caught sight of them through the window and smiled knowingly. She nudged Richard, who glanced outside, and, to everyone's surprise, raised his glass in a silent toast to the couple. "Shall we?" Alexander asked, offering his arm as they prepared to join the celebration. Maya took his arm, the key clutched firmly in her other hand. "We shall." As they stepped into the warmth of family and future, Maya reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them here. What had begun as the most bizarre business transaction of her career had evolved into the most authentic relationship of her life. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements turned out to be exactly the ones the heart had been waiting for all along.